Hello everyone. If you are new to my channel, then consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do it, thanks. By the way, I also have a Luffy fan fiction channel. If you are interested, the link is in the description. Naruto DxD by NarutoNega. Naruto stars as a regular human. One day trying to protect Issei, he gets killed only to discover his true powers. What will he do with the power to end the world? I don't own anything. Adios.
But I don't want to kurama. It's not my fault Matabi seduced you. I'm not going to screw with her newest jinchuriki. Do you want my Ka-chan's chains to hook you to a moon again? Yay, that's what I thought, you furry bastard. What do you mean I'm going to be late? For shit, woke up the startled Naruto, his eyes snapping open and instantly shifting to his left, reading the time of 7:20 a.m. Plenty of time, thought Naruto as he released a sigh, before he felt something on his chest. Moving his head down so that his chin was touching his chest, Naruto came upon the sight of Asia's blonde hair sprawled all around Naruto's chest with her body wrapped around his, from what he could feel anyway, seeing as how the blanket was there restricting the view. Lifting his left hand up, Naruto started to rub Asia's head, slowly waking the blonde girl up from her slumber. Hey Asia, we gotta get ready soon, remember? School. Muttered Naruto in a soft tone, slowly awaking Asia, who simply lifted her head and saw Naruto's blonde spiky hair and blue eyes, and whisker marks, can't forget those. Morning Naruto-kun, spoke Asia, as she lowered her head back to Naruto's chest, intent to fall asleep once more. Seeing this, Naruto had to resort to option 2 when faced with these situations. Lifting himself up, Naruto made sure to wrap his arms around Asia's small blue sleeping gown and carried her towards the kitchen, living room. Having created a clone, Naruto quickly used the substitution jutsu to swap places with his clone, who was all too happy to start patting Asia's head, making the smaller blonde squeal in joy at random moments. Some 2 cage bushins, Naruto left towards the shower, quickly cleaning himself as he wanted to get to school early to make sure Asia had all her classes that she could with him. Feeling the water droplets hitting his skin felt nice. Using a heating seal made the water at a very nice heat as it dropped from the shower head and hit the occupant, making sure that while the water is nice and warm, it's not too hot either. Quickly getting out, Naruto then proceeded to dry his spiky hair with a towel, making sure that there wasn't any water within his blonde mane. Quickly chucking on his black pants and orange shirt, Naruto walked out of the room, his black blazer sitting on top of his shoulder as he walked towards the kitchen, where the sounds of Asia eating was heard. Walking into the room, Naruto couldn't help but smile slightly as Asia was eating many different dishes that he knew for breakfast. Standing on the edge of the wall for about a minute, completely missed by Asia, Naruto felt a clone tap him on the shoulder and open a bag that held the girl's uniform for Kuo. Nodding to his clones and giving him the instructions to disperse, Naruto walked behind Asia's chair and covered her eyes with 2 hands. Guess who? Asked Naruto, making his voice seem very old. Unfortunately, Asia knew who it was. Hello Naruto-kun, said Asia as she turned in her chair to look at Naruto, who held her new school cloths in front of him and low enough so that Asia could see what was in the bag. Naruto grinned slightly as he widened the bag further. I got your new school uniform. So how about we leave early today and set you up for school? Asked Naruto, getting a nod from Asia. Okay, replied Asia as she took the bag from Naruto's hands and walked out of the kitchen, living room, and into the closest bathroom. In the next 10 minutes, both Asia and Naruto are sitting at the front of the school with Naruto having a narrowed glare towards the ground, Asia patting him on the back. It's okay Naruto-kun, just because we're only in mentor together doesn't mean you can't protect me. Bedsides, the Lord's fateful guidance will warn you if I'm in danger, said Asia as she hugged Naruto, getting some looks from the other students before they shook their head and got onto their own business. Naruto simply grinned at Asia's answer. Yeah sure you will, but you're right, if you are ever in true danger, I will be there to help you. Bayo, believe it. At that, Asia smiled and stood up, ready for first day of school. Let's go Naruto-kun, shouted Asia as she jumped up and down in an excited fashion, causing Naruto to widen his smile. Okay, replied Naruto, holding Asia's hand as they walked into the front of the school, catching the attention of a certain red-haired woman who looked at Asia in a critical view. May have a sacred gear. Lucky I managed to have the girls' classes rearranged so that I or my peerage members were in most of her classes. Now how to approach. I can't take as much time with Riser coming any week now. I might have to give myself to Issei to break out of it if necessary, mumbled Rias to herself, biting one of her fingernails as she watched as both Naruto and Asia walked up the stairs, causing Rias to stare at the blonde reborn ninja. What are you Naruto? Asked Rias out loud as she saw both him and the new student Asia disappear around the corner. Kiba, called out Rias, watching as her blonde knight appeared within a few moments. I need you to keep Naruto away from the new student Asia as much as possible. From what I guess, she holds a sacred gear, however, I'm not sure which one, spoke Rias as she kept her eyes glued to the last location she could see both Naruto and Asia. Kiba nodded, "It will be done, bucko," replied Kiba before he left. With that done, Riaz looked back at her table, a chessboard with multiple pieces still missing with only a few on it. "It's not enough," muttered Riaz once more, before leaving for the showers in the clubhouse, aiming to let some stress soak out of her body. 1 hour later, currently, Naruto was drawing in his book, The image of Konoha from his father's head on the Hokage monument. After seeing Konoha from that view, he had gotten a near-perfect picture image of it, making it easier for Naruto to draw it with perfect accuracy. "Psst, hey Naruto," came a voice behind him. Turning his head around, he noticed that it was Issei who spoke to him. "Since when was Issei in this class?" Yo?" asked Naruto, completely not sure how to talk as he practically dropped Issei as a friend since the pervert didn't talk to him after being a devil. Issei rubbed his head slightly and chuckled nervously. "Do you know who that new blonde chick is? Looks so cute and I wanted to have a shot at her," asked Issei with a slight laugh, which slowly died down after seeing the blank look on Naruto's face, which secretly stated, "I'm going to prank you, and when I do, you will not leave your house due to the shame," before he turned around and continued his drawing, causing Issei to have a small waterfall tears appearing on his face. 1 hour later, currently we find Naruto walking across the town, hands in pockets as he walked towards a regular sweet shop he regularly visited as he ditched the last period of class via Cage Bushin taking his place. This was also the method he used to make sure Asia was safe in all her classes. Seeing the sweet store, Naruto removed his right hand from his pocket and pushed the door open. The ringing bell announced his arrival. "Naruto, how's it going, my boy? I heard you got evicted. Those bastards in the government don't know left from right," grumbled an old man about the age 60 or so. The man had tanned skin which he probably got through working in the sun a lot when he was younger. He also had very short black hair with black eyes along with a bit of chin hair which was gray. The man's build also helped tell that he used to work in places with physical requirements as the man's arms were quite large, which strained his small t-shirt as it couldn't wrap around the man's arms. "Hey Mitaso, how's the family?" asked Naruto with a wave as he stood in the front of the desk, ignoring the fact that he could feel 2 signatures appear in his mind. The man simply grinned. "Oh, you know, regular stuff. Although my granddaughter is going to high school next year, for when she goes to Kuo for your last year," spoke the man with a cheesy grin on his face, causing Naruto to simply give out a huff, smile still on his face, before he looked to where he felt the 2 signatures. When Naruto turned his head, he looked at 2 small girls, both with blonde hair. The girl on the right had dark blue eyes and long blonde hair tied into twin tails with large drill-like curls with blue ribbons keeping them in place. The front of her hair has multiple bangs hanging over her forehead with a V-shaped fringe hanging over the bridge of her nose. She also appeared to like the princess appeal as she wore a pink dress with white accents along with a magenta bow near her neck. She also appeared to wear pink shoes with white Fairla socks that jutted up from her shoes. The smaller blonde to the left however had yellow eyes and a cute face. Her hair was covering most of her face with her fringe covering a bit of her eyes and her cheeks. She also had her hair spiking out from behind her head while still having most of her hair conceal her head. She wore a traditional Miko outfit with a large star surrounded by 5 smaller stars on her long sleeves. She also wore some sandals with socks. Turning his head back to Mitaso, Naruto jabbed a thumb to the 2 sad-looking girls. "What's up with them?" asked Naruto, getting a small chuckle from the old man. "They came in about an hour ago but didn't have any money on them, so I gave them a few samples. Then they got upset that I couldn't give them any more for free so they sat there upset, probably waiting for their parents or something," spoke the man as he walked away to the back to take out the next batch of cookies. Turning his head once more towards the 2 girls, who seemed to fall into an even bigger depression at waiting so long, Naruto grinned slightly before walking up to them. Holding his hand out, Naruto began to introduce himself. "Hi, my name is Na, go away peasant," spoke the blonde with the twin tails framing her face, causing Naruto to twitch his eyebrow at the girl, before moving his hand to the smaller blonde and restarted. "Hi there, my name is Naruto Uzumaki. Would you like me to get you some sweets? The old man told me you were stuck here for an hour and it just seems rude no one offered to buy you any sweets," said Naruto as he held his hand out to the girl who sent an aura that he was quite familiar with. The little blonde with gold eyes stared at Naruto for a moment, before nodding her head and taking his hand to be pulled up off her seat before she spoke. "Thank you, my name is Kuno and I'm a 9-tailed fox," said the little girl in a cute voice, causing some of the people eating to stop and "ah" at what she said she was. Now while everyone awed, Naruto went ramrod straight, before shaking his head, making sure to remember to ask her later about that scene as she had yokai, which Kurama had told him was just condensed chakra to a point it wasn't chakra, but an evolved form of chakra that the Biju had, thanks to the 10 tails. Putting on a smile, Naruto held Kunu's hand and walked towards the counter, turning his head back to the other blonde. "The option is still available if you want," replied Naruto, not very shocked when he felt the other blonde appear to his right nearly a second later, causing him to chuckle and make the blonde blush in embarrassment. Yo Mitaso, I'm buying for these two, okay? They can have whatever they want, said Naruto as he and the two smaller blondes got closer to the front desk, causing the man to grin evilly. Oh, are you sure, Naruto? Asked Mitaso with a grin stretching his face, as he looked towards Naruto. Seeing this, Naruto just nodded hesitantly, only to watch as Mitaso pulled out 4 large bags filled to the brim with lollies with 2 more neatly sorted bags full with cakes and pastries. Are you sure now? Asked the man with a grin, noticing the 2 girls looking down as to expect another person to run out of the shop. Sure, can I also have a golden mud cake with 4 boxes of dango? Asked Naruto as he pulled out 700 yen, 1 yen equals $1, and placed it on the counter, causing the 2 smaller blondes to look at him in shock, before the blonde who called herself a Kyuubi jumped onto his back. Yay, you're my new best friend, shouted the golden-eyed child who was now strangling Naruto with her reverse hug, which Naruto didn't seem to mind as he used wind chakra to replace the needed oxygen his body required. The other blonde that Naruto hadn't gotten their name simply stared at Naruto with shock for a few moments before she hugged him. You better be happy that someone of my prestige is hugging you, muttered the girl before letting go and looking at him. My name is Ravel Phoenix, spoke Ravel as she turned her head to the mountain of pastries and sweets. Naruto looked at the 6 or so large bags with a grin, then sweat dropped when his order was placed in a separate bag to the left, with Mitaso giving him an evil grin. You can keep the change, said Naruto with a slight squeak, causing the man to grin as he placed his order in one of the large bags. Naruto sent the old man a small glare before picking up all 6 bags, 3 on each hand, surprising a few people there as they decided they wanted to try see how heavy it was and could barely lift a single bag a millimeter off the table. Must be why the old man put everything in the bags on the counter as he filled them up. Turning around, Naruto walked towards the door, kicking it open as he couldn't use his hands, causing both Ravel and Kuno to sweat drop slightly as they were going to open the door for him. Walking behind Naruto, they watched in surprise as he went into an alleyway, making the 2 girls jumpy as they followed after him and their sweets. However, when they went into the alleyway, they watched in shock as 2 identical copies of Naruto appeared and took the bags of sweats. Naruto then turned to them and motioned them to come towards him. Okay, since I don't exactly want to be walking around with that much sweats, I'm going to take you 2 to my house to eat them, okay? But I need you 2 to hold my hand as I will be making this move at an incredibly fast speed to reach the location. It's just outside of the city, said Naruto as he held his hands out for both of the blondes. Watching as both gave their hands, Naruto gave a slight grin before disappearing with the 2 girls. Naruto's house, appearing not a moment later, Naruto watched as the 2 blondes started to walk like the floor was moving, before standing up straight without any signs of dizziness shown. Smiling, Naruto clapped his hands together. Okay, so we can either eat here outside of my house, or we can eat inside. You can choose, said Naruto as he crossed his arms over his chest, a gnawing feeling appearing in the back of his head for some reason. Inside, both said simultaneously. Nodding, Naruto went towards the front door and sent a burst of chakra, making the door open without any problem. Walking inside, Naruto took his shoes off and left them at the front as he walked towards the large living room, kitchen. Seeing his 2 clones, Naruto waved them off after they had neatly placed the sweats and pastries into categories and groups, making it easier for them to pick and choose. Turning his head around, Naruto noticed both Kuno and Ravel staring at the quite large house with slight awe, before they quickly caught up with Naruto and jumped onto the couches, shocked at how comfy it was. Chuckling slightly, Naruto moved the sweats onto the coffee table with some plates for the 2 girls, who instantly dug in. Chuckling slightly, Naruto ate his dango quite slowly, enjoying the flavor as he bit into the small ball covered in sauce. Soon the entire sets of pastries were gone, along with all the sweats, mostly consumed by Ravel, much to her embarrassment. However, most of the pastries went to Kuno in that regard, who also mimicked Ravel in embarrassment blushes. Putting down his plate, Naruto sent the 2 a small grin. So elves? Asked Naruto, getting a nod from both girls, before his face went slightly curious. So why was there a devil and yokai in a sweet shop? Asked Naruto, getting the 2 girls to widen their eyes, before Kuno jumped at his face, prepared to scratch it to smithereens while Ravel summoned some fire around her hand. Naruto simply grabbed Kuno under her armpits and held her away from his face, now noticing the claws she had along with the 9 golden tails wagging around her behind. Hey, calm down, I was just asking a question, damn it, shouted Naruto with a sigh-ish tone as he felt the small apparent 9 tails calm down in his hands, along with Ravel who dismissed her flames. Giving out a slight huff, Naruto lowered Kuno onto the soft couch, making sure her tails didn't get squished underneath her. Sitting back down, Naruto began to ask them questions. So I guess you weren't joking about being a 9-tailed fox, Kuno-chan. Is there a chance that you know of a kurama if there is more of you? Asked Naruto, looking at the golden-eyed blonde, who simply shook her head. I have never heard of a kurama. There is only 2 kyubis and that's me and my mother. My father was just apparently a young human she met, spoke Kuno. Naruto gave a small sad sigh before looking at Revel. So I know that Kuno-chan here is a kyuubi, and I know that you're a devil, but what are you specifically? Asked Naruto, only to get a huff from the girl. How you don't know who I am already tells me you're a weaker being, after all. All devils know of the Phoenix clan. You know, the clan that is held highly due to us being nearly impossible to kill with our super regeneration and our supreme control over both fire and wind, like a phoenix. How do you not know of us? Asked Revel when she saw that Naruto only looked at her blankly. Because I'm human, said Naruto, causing both Devil and Fox to widen their eyes. Bullshit, shouted both girls, causing Naruto to widen his eyes in slight fright when both jumped at him. Landing on the ground, Naruto had both blondes start poking and prodding him all over. What are you, damn it? Screamed Ravel as she pulled Naruto's face with Kuno pulling on Naruto's arm. I am Huma-en, spoke Naruto in between the pulling of his face, before he substituted with a pillow, causing the girls to widen their eyes in shock. You're a magician, pointed out Revel, Kuno nodding in agreement, even if they have never heard of magic that allows you to swap places with another object. It's not magic, it's a type of energy I was born with. Hell, most humans have it, but without someone like me to strengthen their own energy, they won't be able to use any of it. But there is also the fact that I'm a lot stronger than any human around these parts, spoke Naruto, causing the girls to give up with a sigh. Fine, don't tell us. Both spoke in a synchronized tone, causing Naruto to sweat drop. But before anything else could happen, an orange circle appeared in the middle of the room, causing Ravel to look towards it. Soon the orange circle glowed slightly, showing a man in a red suit standing in the middle of it. The man had blonde spiky hair with dark blue eyes, however, without even a look Naruto could tell this was a Sasuke wannabe. Hey, you know Sasuke. You know every asshole copycat. Bah, Ravel, if you choose to go to the human world I will never understand. We have plenty of sweets at home. Honestly, the air here is so unpure and disgusting, muttered the man as he looked around, before looking directly at Naruto. Oh, and what's this? A human, Ravel? You're standing near a human? What is wrong with you to be standing near this piece of trash? Strike 1, honestly he looks stupid. What possessed you to be around this poor excuse of a man? Strike 2, the man then looked towards Kuno with a bored look. Oh, what's this? A weak and pathetic kyuubi? What reason would you have to be near these unworthy peasants? The whole Fox clan is nearly gone and a lowly human who should be begging you to be around you. Finished the man with his arms crossed. Strike 3, 4, 5, 6 and a million, bam. The man was sent through the front of Naruto's house by Naruto's fist. Turning to Ravel, Naruto gave a small sheepish wave. Sorry, said Naruto, confusion Ravel. Why? Asked Ravel, only to widen her eyes as Naruto gave an evil grin. I'm going to kick the dude's ass all over the place. You mind giving me his name? Asked Naruto, feeling the man's presence finally returning to the clearing. He's my older brother, Riser Phoenix. You shouldn't fight him, and he has never lost in a fight, especially to a human. Finished Ravel, who simply saw Naruto wave his hand. Meh, don't worry. I'll kick his ass around. So sorry about doing this to your brother, but if he was a good brother he would not have made insults to you and your friend, said Naruto before he disappeared with both Ravel and Kuno moving to the front of the house, only to watch as both Naruto and Riser were surrounded by a barrier created by seals. Inside the barrier, Riser had a glare full of hatred directed towards Naruto as flames surrounded him. You pathetic human. How dare you attack me, Riser Phoenix, shouted Riser as he dashed towards Naruto, who simply tilted his head slightly, dodging the blow. I dunno, how about you were and still are acting like a bastard with a pole shoved up his ass. Now that I think about it, you would represent a yakitori dish to near perfection. Chicken with a stick shoved up its ass. Yeah, you defiantly fit that, spoke Naruto as he jumped out of the way from a fireball that exploded at his original battle position. UPESANT, screamed Riser, dashing towards Naruto with flaming wings trailing behind him, causing Naruto to stare at the man with a raised eyebrow. Flamed wings? Are you trying to cook yourself or something so I can put you up for a yakitori dish? Asked Naruto as he slid under Riser, gripping Riser's ankle as he did so, before changing from a slide into a throwing position, sending Riser straight into the barrier. Riser's glare intensified. Soon, multiple circles appeared around him and soon after, a group of women appeared. Attack the human bastard, shouted Riser, leading the charge of the group, causing Naruto to simply grin. Ah, look at that. Little Yakitori has a group of girls, probably stronger than him if what I've seen is an indication, said Naruto, grin firmly in place as he tilted his head as magic flew by him. Looking to his left, he saw a cat girl jump at him while the other jumped at him from the other side, easily picked up by Naruto's sensory prowess. Throwing his left hand out, Naruto caught one of the cat girls by the throat before chucking the girl towards the sky, hitting the strongest looking woman there and caused both of them to smash into the barrier, completely knocked out due to the force. Crouching down and twisting himself, Naruto threw his legs straight into the air, hitting the other cat girl in the stomach and sending her towards the sky, before jumping up and landing a heel kick to her spine, sending the poor girl against the hard ground, creating a dust cloud that blocked the other's view. Twisting around in the air, Naruto held a tiger sign before spitting out hundreds of fireballs all around the barrier, completely at random. Soon the sounds and screams caused by explosions were heard by Naruto, who flipped himself to land in a crouch, before sinking into the ground, dust clouds still making it impossible to view him. Now Riser was scared. His entire peerage, if what he could hear, was defeated with barely any effort from the human's part. Suddenly, Riser felt the ground below him rumble slightly, before he felt two hands wrap around his ankles and drag him into the earth. His eyes widened with absolute fear of being buried alive. However, his head stopped sinking once his neck was completely hidden beneath the earth, causing him to release a slight sigh when he felt himself stop sinking. Before he felt a kicked up, Riser felt fear in the first time. Not only did a human defeat him, but he had almost killed him as well, it being stuck up to his neck in dirt said anything. "Yo, teriyaki chicken. Shouldn't you, I dunno, be teaching this human a lesson?" asked Naruto with a cheeky grin on his face with a single eyebrow raised, causing the man in the ground to go from a fearful expression to one of anger and hate. "I order you to release me," screamed Riser from his position, only to cause Naruto to smirk, before Naruto snapped his fingers, sending his previous dust cloud away, showing the reinforcements Riser had called upon knocked out with scrapes and flames all across the floor. Naruto then turned back towards Riser. "So, you were going to order me?" asked Naruto, causing Riser to grit his teeth in anger. "Naruto-san," called out a voice towards his house. Turning around, Naruto saw Ravel shouting. "Yeah, Ravel?" asked Naruto with his arms crossed and one foot on top of Riser's head, only making the man more furious. "Can you please just let my Ni-san get out of here? I had to go anyway," spoke Ravel, only watching as Naruto gave a small nod and wave, dispersing the barrier around him. "Sure, but you will probably have to take him home like that. I don't trust the dude not to attempt to burn down my house or attack me," replied Naruto in a bored tone, getting a nod as Ravel summoned circles to take Riser's peerage back home. She then stood on a sum seal herself with Riser's head being next to her. However, before she could go, Naruto spoke. "Feel free to drop by Ravel-chan," shouted Naruto with a grin that only enlarged when Ravel blushed slightly. Maybe," spoke Ravel as she and Riser, along with his peerage, disappeared. Turning around, Naruto walked towards the shell-shocked Kuno and rubbed her head, snapping her out of her shock. "Hey Kuno-chan, wanna go to the school I go to?" asked Naruto, getting a nod from the little nine tails, before Naruto stood ramrod straight. "Never mind, Rias, you and your peerage get out now," spoke Naruto holding Kuno's hand within his own, causing the little kitsune to smile slightly at the warmth feeling she felt. Soon Rias and her peerage dropped down from the trees, shock written upon their faces, but what shocked Naruto was the odd aura he felt from one of the devils. "Asia," muttered Naruto as he looked at the blonde girl standing near Rias with a grin. "Hey Naruto-kun. Bucko told me how I could now help you by being a devil, even though I didn't want to be a devil. I wanted to help protect you," shouted Asia as she jumped at Naruto and wrapped her arms around his neck. Naruto wrapping a single arm around her waist. Naruto then mumbled into Asia's shoulder, causing the small blonde to giggle slightly. Naruto then lowered Asia back to the ground while still holding onto Kuno's hand, before looking towards Rias's peerage, who seemed to be still in shock, while other than Kiba and Issei, who had no idea why Rias and the others were shocked at who Naruto had just beaten near instantly. Naruto then turned towards Asia. "Hey Asia, can you take little Kuno around the house for a tour?" asked Naruto, getting a nod from the newest devil within Rias's peerage. Looking at Kuno with a smile, Naruto moved her hand from his to Asia's, who then took Kuno's hand and walked inside the house, ignoring the fact that the front part of the house where Naruto sent Riser through was already fixed. Naruto then looked towards Rias for a moment, before appearing right in front of her with a narrowed glare. "Why, better yet, how did you recruit Asia without me knowing?" asked Naruto shinobi mode on full pelt as he looked into Rias's eyes, slightly getting lost in them for a moment, before hardening his own. However, Rias couldn't answer as she kept on mumbling. "Naruto, Riser, engagement, beaten," muttered Rias, still completely in shock. Until Naruto pinched her cheek, causing her to gasp out. "Ouch! What the hell?" shouted Rias as she punched Naruto in the face, only for him to dodge and keep pinching her soft cheeks. "Stop pinching my cheek," shouted Rias as she sent punches and kicks towards the bored Naruto, who simply dodged with barely any effort. "Why did you recruit Asia?" asked Naruto, getting Rias to stop her punches and kicks. "Because I need as much help as possible," whispered Rias as she looked at the damage Naruto had caused within the span of a minute. Letting go of her cheek, Naruto summoned a silence barrier around the two of them, causing Rias's peerage members to attempt to attack the barrier, only to get repulsed at each attempt. "Why do you need help, Rias?" asked Naruto, his arms crossed with a serious expression appearing on his face. I'm being forced into a marriage, muttered Rias, tears appearing in the corners of her eyes as she moved her head down, only to be lifted up by her chin. Who forced you and who are you marrying? Asked Naruto with a calm tone. Rias's lips started to tremble as her body started to shake. My family, and I'm supposed to marry, Riser Phoenix, the man you just fought. Spoke Rias, finally breaking into tears, which were soon wiped away from her eyes by Naruto as he looked into Rias's bluish-green eyes. Is there any way to get you out of it? Asked Naruto with a softer expression on his face as he looked into Rias's eyes. At this, Rias moved her eyes away from Naruto's. Yes, there's either me battling Riser in what we devils call rating game, or I lose my virginity to someone, spoke Rias, causing Naruto to have a slight flashback to his previous life. You don't need to do this, Shizuka. It's your life, your choice, shouted Naruto as he stood across from Akunoichi from Nadeshiko. I must, replied the female across from him. I have no choice, said the female as she charged at him. Naruto closed his eyes for a few moments. I saved Shizuka from a similar fate. I won't let you go through it. No matter how much I want to punch your face, Rias. Think of this as a thank you for letting me become who I was from my near death. Snapping his eyes open, Naruto gave a slight grin. Okay. Is there a way for me to help without becoming a devil? Asked Naruto with a grin as he looked at the stunned Rias, who had tears once again spilling. Naruto, muttered Rias, her head down, causing her amazing red hair to cover her face. Yes? Asked Naruto with a raised eyebrow. Thank you, shouted Rias, jumping up and kissing Naruto on the lips, shocking Rias's entire peerage from outside of the barrier, along with Asia and Kuno who walked out at that moment. Now, don't let it be said Naruto didn't enjoy it, because right now, the inner pervert Jiraiya had grew in the previous life jumped out, causing him to wrap his arms around Rias's waist as both he and Rias kissed. Yay, yay, yay. No, I'm not making them a couple for this moment. This is just Rias expressing herself to the person who can practically end her forced engagement near instantly just by saying, yes. Soon the kiss ended with Rias smiling up at Naruto. To answer your question, yes there is, actually there are a few ways, but they are mostly for devils who want to have another devil battle for them in rating games. Spoke Rias, causing Naruto to nod his head. Okay, but just so we are clear, you now have a responsibility of protecting Asia along with myself. So if Asia is with you and for some reason I'm not, I expect her to be safe, something I know you can do. Spoke Naruto, before he looked towards the shocked peerage. As a request though, I would like to train your peerage, no offense, but they seemed really shocked that I defeated Riser within a few minutes. Replied Naruto looking at Rias's peerage with a blank look, causing Rias to sigh slightly. Including yourself. Said Naruto in an afterthought, causing Rias to huff. Fine, muttered Rias, annoyed that she has to be trained by a human of all things. You know I can sense his emotions, right? It's the only reason tacked you and your group for pretty much 1. Leaving me to die. 2. Kicking me out of my house. And finally 3. Turn little Asia into a devil, although that last one does make me want to hit you. But at least this way Asia can make more friends, muttered Naruto before he remembered something. Oh, you might want to also let go of me as well, Rias. Issei looks like he's going to blow a gasket at the way you're hugging me. Spoke Naruto with a grin upon his face as he looked towards Issei with a peace sign. This made Rias blush slightly before letting him go. Feeling Rias let go, Naruto snapped his fingers once more, allowing the silencing barrier fall. So how do we do this? Asked Naruto with his arms crossed with Rias mimicking the action. Blood oath. Rias replied simply as she held a piece of paper out, soon covered by her energy. Seeing this, Naruto brought one of his thumbs up to his mouth before using chakra to sharpen his canine. Biting the soft-skinned part of his thumb, Naruto forced his body's healing rate down enough so that he could put some blood onto the paper Rias held in front of him. Watching as the blood dripped onto the paper, Rias then held out a night piece towards it before looking up towards Naruto. A piece is essential as without it, you wouldn't be classified under my peerage during rating games or battles. But this also lets you choose if you wish to join in on battles or simply watch. Either way, you get the ability to travel wherever the Gremmaries are able to without others attempting to kill you for it. Finished Rias as the night piece sank into the paper, which then shot onto Naruto's right wrist, wrapping itself to his skin before sinking in and leaving the mark of Gremmarie on the top of his right wrist. Blinking, Naruto stared down at his wrist for a few moments before looking up at Rias. Do I have to do the delivery thing all devils have to do? I mean, since I'm not technically a devil, I don't have to do that like the magic seal told me, right? Asked Naruto as he saw the Gremmarie seal pulse a bit. Rias chuckled evilly. Yes you do. Consider this payback for making all my plans of making your life a little difficult backfiring and making life better for you. Said Rias with an evil tone, causing Naruto to simply huff. Oh well, the seal also told me that I gain more strength from handing out seals and getting contracts. Well then, do you have any on you? Asked Naruto, faking the sad dramatic tone he was putting on. Not that any other person there could tell. Rias grinned. Sure I do, right here. said Rias, some 100 flyers right in front of Naruto, who changed his sad expression to a very happy expression. Great, shouted Naruto. Kage Bushin no Jutsu. Soon the newly formed clones each had a paper and left, causing Rias's peerage to drop their jaw at the sight of hundreds of Naruto leaving. Grinning, Naruto turned around and walked inside, sure to give a little wave as he left. However, he stopped when he saw Kuno walking towards the forest herself. Changing course, Naruto appeared behind the little Kyuubi and rubbed her head, making the girl jump in slight shock. "Hey, you weren't going to leave with your mummy without saying see ya later, were you?" asked Naruto with a small grin as he went down on one knee and rubbed the fox ears of the girl. "See ya," spoke Kuno in a happy tone, before she walked off into the heavy bushed area and disappeared. While Naruto did detect another being with a very similar aura just grab Kuno and run off. Turning around back towards his house, Naruto's eye twitched as he felt Rias's peerage walk around his house with Asia leading them. "Is it because I'm sort of in her peerage that she and her friends are allowed to enter my house?" muttered Naruto to himself as he walked inside his house to see all of Rias's peerage at the kitchen table with knives and forks. Raising an eyebrow, Naruto caught the sight of Asia looking at him pleadingly. "Naruto-kun, can you please make some dinner for my new friends?" asked Asia with her big green eyes glowing, causing Naruto to sigh. Walking up towards the backyard door, Naruto summoned a single clone, who then began cooking while Naruto summoned his 500 or so clones to continue training, before walking back in and taking his clone's place over. Turning back to Asia's new friends, Naruto gave a slight grin. "Okay, tonight we are having some yakitori," said Naruto with a grin, causing the peerage to laugh at his choice. House of Phoenix, Riser laid on his bed looking up at his ceiling. Suddenly he had an urge to attack a blonde-haired human. "Bastard will die by my hand, then I won't hear any more yakitori jokes," mumbled Riser as he closed his eyes, only to see Naruto in a chef hat with a yakitori stick in his hand with chicken still on it. "Damn it," shouted Riser, causing everyone in the Phoenix clan to twitch at the volume. Back with Naruto, Naruto simply grinned at the cooking chicken in front of him. "Disgraceful," using a name when not knowing the true meaning behind it, spoke a voice within the dark, causing Naruto to snap his head around as he looked around the darkness that surrounded him. What the hell?" shouted Naruto, moving his head around rapidly in a panic as he watched the darkness span on and on, no other color but the darkest of blacks around. "You are nothing like the real Naruto, just a brat who enjoyed the gifts of his past self," spoke the voice one more, his voice projecting through the darkness. Naruto narrowed his eyes. "What the hell do you mean? I'm Naruto Uzumaki?" shouted Naruto, only to see a red pathway being created directly in front of him. A completely dark figure standing at the other end. "You saw the memories, felt a small bit of the emotions, but didn't get the true feeling of what it means to be Naruto," spoke the figure as it walked slowly towards him, still completely covered in darkness as he walked closer. Clenching his fist, Naruto moved his body forward towards the figure, fist raised up. "Fuck you," shouted Naruto as he rammed his fist forward, only to widen his eyes in shock as the figure caught his hand with his own. "You are nothing but a child who took what Naruto wanted for granted, until you truly become him. You are nothing but a disgrace that I will take over," shouted the figure, lifting his head up to show a near-identical Naruto with black sclera and red slit irises. However, the biggest difference was what he was wearing. He was wearing what he wore during the 4th Shinobi War. Naruto ripped his hand out of the other Naruto's grip, walking backwards in fear as the clone moved towards him. Dark Naruto, but how? I joined up with you at the Waterfall of Truth," shouted Naruto as he walked backwards with shock written upon his face, causing Dark Naruto to growl. Even now you are not the real Naruto. Just a sad version of him," shouted Dark Naruto as he appeared right in front of Naruto, smashing his leg into Naruto's ribs, making a few cracking sounds as Naruto was sent flying, skidding across the darkness. Naruto coughed up some blood as he looked towards his darker self, his eyes now only showing a single emotion. "Fear, no, get back, get away from me," shouted Naruto as he started to crawl away from his darker clone, who simply scowled before appearing next to the crawling Naruto as kicking him in the ribs once more. "The one I fused with, Naruto Uzumaki, the real Naruto Uzumaki, wouldn't allow what happened to Asia without any form of anger. The real Naruto Uzumaki personally looked after his friends. The real Uzumaki gave a damn about his precious people," shouted Dark Naruto as he gripped the now bleeding Naruto's black blazer, lifting him up with rage. Bringing the bleeding Naruto closer to his face, Dark Naruto simply growled. "How did such a disgrace like you appeared? I have no clue. If Kurama was here, hell anyone we used to know. Kurama, Tu-san, Ka-chan, Konohamaru, Anbu, Moegi Sasuke, Sakura, Hinata, Ino, Shino, Shikamaru, Choji, Kiba, Lee, Neji, Tenten, Sai, Kakashi Sensei, Captain Yamato, Jiji, Asuma Sensei, Kuranai sensei, Gai sensei, Ero senin, Tsunade ba-chan, Shizun ne-chan, they would completely agree. You are not Naruto Uzumaki, not the true Naruto Uzumaki. But I will say you resemble him in traits and a big chunk of his attitude. But not the part of attitude and spirit that the real Naruto had. And I am not going to let this happen, not letting a mistake like you drag the spirit of Naruto Uzumaki into the ground. This time, you will live through it all, the pain, the hatred, and the sadness, all the negative emotions Naruto lived through. The one that truly deserves to be alive. The one I will bond with once again, shouted Dark Naruto as he gripped the bleeding Naruto's head with both hands, exploding in a shining light as the images of Naruto flashed by. Naruto ni-san, shouted 3 voices. Damn it Naruto, shouted a woman. Naruto, you have to be more careful, spoke a gentle voice. Brat, I don't care how much of your father you are, you're still a brat, shouted an annoyed voice. You're really something Naruto, spoke an even tone voice. You're definitely sensei's son Naruto, spoke a slightly happy voice. Dazzle in the flames of youth, said an extremely energetic voice. Wind style huh? You're one of a kind, spoke a gruff voice. You're doing well Naruto-san, spoke a beautiful voice. Enna Naruto K-kun, spoke a shy voice. Yo, Naruto, shouted a brash voice. Naruto-san, spoke a calm voice. Naruto, spoke a snotty voice. Troublesome blonde, spoke a lazy voice. Hey Naruto, want some chips, asked a voice. You make your own fate, right Naruto, spoke an equally calm voice. You inspired us Naruto, never forget that, spoke a petite voice. Yash, Naruto-kun, let our flames of youth shine, spoke an energetic voice. Naruto baka, shouted a voice. Dobi, spoke the final voice with a smirk imaginable on a hidden face. Kick-ass Databane, spoke an excited voice. I believe in you, spoke a tearful and confident voice. You're the one sage Gigi, spoke of Naruto, spoke 8 voices. Partner, spoke a gruff, prideful voice. Naruto, shouted all the voices together. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, I'm not going to run away and I never go back on my word. That's my ninja way. Suddenly the light faded from sight, 2 figures now standing parallel to each other. Arigato, spoke Naruto, lifting his now cleared of blood face to look at his darker self. Thank you once again, although I don't like how I got revived. But I do thank you for it. Spoke Naruto with a slight smile upon his face as he looked towards his darker self, who simply gave a smirk. Better you than the other guy, bastard might have had gotten you perfect in some form. But not what truly matters. Besides, I've already gotten used to bonding with you, so think of it as a little positive to me by getting you back. Spoke the darker Naruto with his arms crossed and smirk stuck to his face. Hee, sure whatever you say, spoke Naruto with a grin as he looked upwards, before a slight frown appeared on his face. I thought I changed this place before, guess I gotta do it again. Spoke Naruto in a calm tone as he watched as the darkness disappeared within his mindscape once more, before being changed into a perfect replica of Konoha. Breathing in, Naruto simply began to walk with his darker self towards a special shop of his, Ichiraku. Pushing a fold over, Naruto came upon the sight of a Yame and Tuchi cooking ramen. Sitting down, Naruto simply watched as the ghostly images of his precious people smile at him and make ramen. Ya no, I really do miss them, but at least this way I can see them each and every day, spoke Naruto with his calm and peaceful tone before giving out a sigh. What's the situation with Asia and the others, and what exactly happened with the other Naruto not doing anything about Rias pretty much using me to have Asia join them? Asked Naruto with a slightly serious tone as he grabbed a pair of chopsticks before snapping them apart and begun eating his fresh ramen. The darker version simply copied him with a grin. Seems like when one of the clones following Asia dispersed within one of Rias's barriers, her devil energy mixed into the chakra returned. Basically, you had a piece of Rias's energy wrapped around your dispersed chakra. Now normally nothing would happen, as the 2 energies mixed. However, Rias's energy had wrapped around your dispersed chakra and entered your system, both blocking out that clone's ability to give you its memories, along with having Rias's energy control your own. Not exactly like hypnosis, but in a way that you would react like Rias's was your everything, that being either wife, girlfriend, etc. Rias's seemed to know that when she kissed your disgrace of a previous host, as she then managed to within you to sway onto her side I suppose, but the topping on the cake is the little peerage seal she placed on your body, basically making you a follower. Now while if you had a strong will, you could easily ignore the feeling of wanting to follow Rias. Suddenly the darker half just gave a sigh. But as you know, the previous Naruto wasn't like you or a regular shinobi with any pride. He hadn't noticed the change in emotions at all. But the best thing to add onto the topped off cake, was the fact that the seal wouldn't release until the instruction which was in the seal, which I quote. Until Rias Gremory defeats Riser Fennex in a ratings game, Naruto Uzumaki will be under the Gremory seal. At this, the darker Naruto simply threw his hands out. So basically, you're going to have to stick with the group until the rise or battle. Well, not stick with them, as they seem to forget that you existed due to Issei apparently growing in strength quite fast. It's funny how they think that doing a few push-ups more than the previous day counts as growing. Hell, they even decided that our training was too easy, even though we gave them the academy obstacle course, which took them 3 times to 4 times the amount of time we should have completed it in the academy. Honestly, the nerve of the bastards at some points annoyed the hell out of me. And then there was the person in control. He did jack diddly squat when they told him his training was too easy. He just agreed with them and did nothing. Hell, he even stopped training to learn to cook for Rias better, shouted darker Naruto with an aggravated tone as he knocked his ramen off the counter, which the real Naruto quickly catches with a golden chakra tail appearing out of his tailbone. Moving his chakra tail up, Naruto placed the ramen bowl back onto the bench, where the darker Naruto simply gave a sigh of relief before digging into his ramen bowl. "What about Asia?" asked the original as he placed his chopsticks down next to his empty bowl, before both disappeared as if they hadn't just been there. Darker Naruto slurped up some noodles before huffing. "I really don't understand how, but she seems to have fallen for Issei, along with every other girl apart from Kaneko in that entire peerage. Well, apart from Kiba as well. He does seem nice though. But I can also tell he's somewhat like Sasuke, just not a bastard," spoke the darker Naruto, before clicking his fingers. "She also left to live with Issei. Who knew the pervert would get his harem," said darker Naruto with a huff, mumbling about, "We should have had a harem back in our world. And why the hell do chicks love the pervert? Jiraiya would kill in this world if that's what girls like." The last one brought a grin to the real Naruto's face. "Naruto," spoke Naruto suddenly. "Yage?" asked darker Naruto as he looked towards the original, who had a grin. "That's your name from now on. No matter how much I know that you're only a collection of my hate. You seem too different in view to be the same as me, so I think you deserve your own name. So how about Naruto?" asked Naruto, getting a raised eyebrow from his darker self before he shrugged. "Sure, why not?" replied the now named Naruto before he placed his chopsticks down next to his ramen, before it disappeared like Naruto's. Raising his hands into a release formation, Naruto looked up at the sky once more. Kai, soon the red sun disappeared, replaced by a bright golden version. Looking towards Naruto, Naruto gave a small smile and wave. "Time to turn the world upside down," spoke Naruto with a grin, only getting away from Naruto as he left the ramen stand. Ring 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 ring. 10 more minutes Ba-chan, muttered Naruto as his chest raised and fell with his breathing, clear signs of him not arousing from his slumber at all. Even with his hand smashed through his 12th alarm clock in the past week or so. "You do know that it's a school day, right? And even if you finished school, your reincarnation still has to go. And seeing as how you're just a mixture of both Naruto, with the real, original being the most dominant, I would have thought you would realize that," voiced out Naruto from within Naruto's mindscape, causing the blonde-haired teen to open his eyes slightly and gaze towards his ceiling. "But why do I have to go to school, damn it? Back where we came from, the school we went to was a ninja school, and while it wasn't exactly cool, we got to learn some form of fighting and ninjutsu. This school we currently go to has nothing of the sort, and I don't care if I'm smart in this school, damn it. It's too boring," muttered Naruto out loud as he pushed his torso up, causing the small white sheets he had over him to fall down, showing his orange singlet off to the world, or the mirror in front of his room. Naruto simply chuckled evilly. "It's not my fault that you go to school, is it? Anyway, wouldn't you be needing to get to class in about 7 minutes? Asked Naruto as he looked at his open hand, which he slowly lowered his fingers one by one, before he closed his fist entirely. Naruto jumped off his bed like it had been set on fire. "Shit!" shouted Naruto as he jumped towards his cabinet as began chucking clothing everywhere, before he passed for a moment. "Didn't I sort all my school cloths and put them in a separate cabinet?" muttered out Naruto towards himself as he looked around his used-to-be-clean cabinet. Moving his eyes towards the bottom left corner, Naruto felt a single bead of sweat drip behind his head as the sorted school cloths laid there in neat piles. Hero of the village, hero of the 4th Shinobi War, sage of Mount Myoboku, the child of prophecy, and I can't even find neatly sorted cloths, muttered Naruto with small bits of waterfall tears trailing down his cheeks in sadness, along with a rain cloud floating above his head with thunder shooting out for a good measure. Shaking his head, Naruto quickly threw his sleeping cloths off towards the laundry basket near the door and quickly threw on his school attire. Standing towards the mirror, Naruto gave himself a quick look over, making sure he didn't have anything in the wrong place or something else. Giving out a sigh, Naruto held a small grin. "Well then, time to go to school, again," muttered Naruto as he walked out of his room and into the kitchen, living room, where he quickly grabbed the bag that was left on top of the coffee table, before walking towards the front door, his right hand ready to grip the doorknob. Just as Naruto's hand was going to grip the doorknob, Naruto paused his hand, before lifting it up towards his face, showing a white ball that looked like the sun. I know that my other felt the sage's chakra inside himself, but how he didn't notice the symbol that represents said power I have no clue, muttered Naruto once more, before turning back towards his room, intent on getting some bandages to cover up his palm and hand. Opening his cabinet once more, Naruto reached out with his left hand to grab a roll of bandages that were neatly tucked in a smaller cabinet inside of his regular one. However, just as Naruto lifted the neatly wrapped bandages, he dropped them in shock as he looked towards his left hand. On his left hand, was a crescent moon, a black crescent moon. Naruto's eyes slowly widened themselves in shock as he looked towards his hand for a few moments. Soon Naruto's hand started to tremble as the adrenaline within Naruto's body began to surge and flow at a fast pace, causing Naruto to snap himself out of his shock. How? I thought that old man Sage only gave me half his chakra. How I know he gave me only half. Sasuke Teme had this same symbol on his own left hand when we battled Madara, spoke Naruto, his voice changing from a fearful confusion to a regular confusion. I wouldn't worry about it now, although, I can't say I'm not curious on how you got it either, but for now we have to go to school, which by the way starts in 2 minutes. Spoke Naruto from within the mindscape of Naruto. Naruto shook his head as he looked at his palms. His right showing the white sun, his left showing the crescent black moon. Why yeah, mumbled out Naruto as he looked back at the cabinet, leaving his original target on the floor. Now I need to cover both my hands, thought Naruto as he opened a drawer to see skin-tight fingerless bag gloves, similar to what Madara had before being the Jubi Jinchuriki. Pulling the 2 gloves on, Naruto closed the closet and turned around, before disappearing within a blink of an eye. Kuo Academy Gym Supply Closet. Appearing with a small bit of smoke, Naruto opened the supply closet a bit, making sure that he didn't make a sound, before sticking his head out and looking in both directions, ignoring the fact that Naruto could have simply sensed if anyone was there. But he wasn't going to take any chances. Opening the supply closet, Naruto quickly walked out, making sure to close the closet quietly so that no one was alerted about him randomly appearing out of a closet. Closing the closet, Naruto gave a slight sigh, before he began walking towards the exit of the gym, which leads to the back entrance of the school. He was sure that if he was a minute or two late, he wouldn't be in that much trouble. Just as he put his left foot out of the gym exit, Naruto felt a signature randomly appear behind him. Stopping his movement, Naruto turned his head around and came upon the sight of the girl he saw on top of the telephone pole a week or so ago. Chakra, muttered the woman with no emotion held within her eyes, with the exception of a little bit of curiosity. Raising an eyebrow, Naruto turned his body to face the little girl's body face on, before looking into her dark black eyes with his own blue ones. The two stared at each other for a few moments, before the little girl walked up closer to him, only standing a few feet from him. I can feel the energy held within you, chakra if I am not mistaken. How a human has achieved the amount I can feel, I will never know, muttered the girl in an emotionless tone, causing Naruto to narrow his eyes slightly. So you know what chakra is, along with being able to feel it. Who are you? Asked Naruto, causing the smaller woman to simply stare back at him blankly. Ophis, the infinite dragon god, replied Ophis in a blank tone as she looked towards Naruto, who simply raised an eyebrow in curiosity. A dragon god, huh? Muttered Naruto as he stared at the gothic Lolita girl for a few seconds with curiosity, before he heard a bell ring. Naruto blinked for a few moments as he looked towards Ophis's direction. Naruto then lowered his head slightly. I'm late, first day I'm truly back. And I'm late, damn it, shouted Naruto with tears pouring down his eyes in a waterfall fashion, something which gained Ophis's attention and curiosity. Walking up to him, the smaller girl stuck a single finger out and placed it under Naruto's eyes and was surprised to find that when she moved her finger back, there was water surrounding her finger. Looking at her now wet finger, Ophis didn't see Naruto moved, before feeling the larger male hugging the life out of her as he cried on her shoulder, something that made Ophis blink in confusion. Looking at the blonde, Ophis gained her blank look once more. You are very weird. Let go of me now, spoke Ophis as she was now poking Naruto's face with her small finger, eventually snapping Naruto out from his semi-breakdown. Moving his head up from Ophis's shoulder, Naruto looked around to notice that he was surrounded by a large group of girls, whose simple raised eyebrow. Chuckling slightly, Naruto let go of Ophis, sending the small girl who had been suspended off the ground by Naruto, back onto the solid earth, where she simply left through the exit and disappeared. Naruto simply scratched the back of his neck in sheepishness. That didn't happen, said Naruto as he slowly walked out of the gym, causing the all-girl class to stare at the exit door. First period class. Sorry I'm late, but on my way here I had to fight a dragon god, and save a cat from a tree, then help an old lady with her groceries, spoke Naruto as he rubbed his neck, causing the whole class to erupt in laughter as the teacher blinked at Naruto. Whatever Naruto-san. Please go to your seat now, spoke the male teacher, wishing to simply start his lesson. Walking towards the back of the classroom, Naruto came upon the sight of his regular desk being taken by Issei, with Asia apparently in their class now. Keeping what knowledge Naruto gave him during the slight briefing when he was asleep, Naruto walked towards the opposite corner of where he usually sat. However, he did feel a slight tug on his shirt as he walked towards his seat. Already knowing who tugged his shirt, Naruto gave a small smile and greeting. "Hey Asia, how's it going?" asked Naruto, attempting to move slightly closer to his seat without Asia noticing as he was now getting a full-blown stare from the teacher. "Oh Naruto-ni-san. It's been going so well for the past week. Issei-kun has taken me everywhere around the city and shown me a lot of the delicacies that the city has to show. It is amazing seeing things in the city," spoke Asia with a peppy attitude, causing Issei to rub his nose with a smile on his face, probably due to hearing that Asia enjoyed spending time with him. Naruto blinked. He hadn't known that Issei was showing Asia around and all. It does kind of make sense that Issei would do that. He did ask Naruto if he knew about Asia to him before. Blinking, Naruto held his small smile as he gave a peace hand sign to Asia. "That's great Asia-chan. But be sure that Issei isn't doing anything perverted around you. He is known for being a pervert and all," spoke Naruto as he rubbed the used-to-be nun's head genteelly, causing the small blonde to giggle. Turning towards his seat once more, Naruto moved his seat back and slid in, placing his bag on the floor beneath his desk. Clearing his throat, the teacher began, few minutes in. Naruto currently had his arms crossed in front of him with the lower part of his face covered by his arms. Looking towards the board, Naruto felt himself internally attempt to commit suicide as he relived his academy days with Iruka replacing his current teacher. It also helped they were both giving a lecture that seemed to last forever. Turning his head up towards the ceiling, Naruto gave an imaginary finger. "Why have you cursed me, you white-haired bastard?" thought Naruto, only getting a paper thrown at his face in return. "Will Issei Hyodo, Asia Argento and Naruto please head towards the Occult Research Club? If teachers may excuse these students it would be good. Thank you for listening." Seeing as the announcement finished, Naruto watched as Issei and Asia stood up and began making their way towards the door, with both Asia and Issei waiting for Naruto, who had not even attempted to move. Seeing this, Issei waved his hand out towards Naruto. "Yo Naruto, we just got called," spoke Issei, with Asia nodding in agreement. Everyone watched as Naruto sat within his seat, before the teacher gave a very large sigh. "Naruto-san, if you would please go. You're disrupting the class," spoke the teacher with a clear tone, getting Naruto to release a sigh himself. "Fine," muttered the reborn ninja as he stood up, grabbing his bag as he walked towards the door, and intentionally leaving his seat out. Walking past both Asia and Issei, Naruto gave a fake smile and thumbs up, not that either noticed. "Okay. Let's go," spoke Naruto in an over-sarcastic tone, not that either Asia or Issei once again noticed. Walking towards the stairs that would take them to the entrance of the school, Naruto looked towards his left and saw a closet. Grabbing both Issei and Asia by their wrists, Naruto opened the closet with his knee and walked inside, before all three of them disappeared. Occult Research Club. Ria sat behind her desk with some tea held within her hand as she looked towards her current members that were there. Counting three, them being Akano, Kaneko and Kiba. Ria sipped some more tea as she moved her eyes towards the clock, showing 10 a.m. on the dot. Looking back to her current companions, Rias began to explain why they were called. "Okay. So as you may know, it's that time of the month where we are able to go to the familiar forest, and before you speak. This isn't for us, it's more for Issei and Asia as they need their familiars, while Naruto could simply tag along, so to speak, as he isn't a full member of my peerage. But during that time, the main objective is to get Asia and Issei a familiar, but it would seem that Sona has a similar idea of going to the familiar forest. Now, as you all know, the familiar master only takes a single group a month, so we, being me and Sona, have decided to hold a competition to see who gets to go. But seeing as how I wanted to be slightly fair, I had let Sona choose the competition. She chose dodgeball, so I just want all of us to have some practice," spoke Rias as she looked towards her present members, who simply nodded. Coo. Rias bucko, you're evil. Having a team game as the competition? Isn't that a bit unfair with a certain speedster in our team? Well, two if you count Kiba, spoke Akano with a grin, causing the only blonde male currently there to give a slight smile and twitch. Rias simply waved Akano off. "It wasn't my fault. Sona could have simply had two of our members battle, or even myself against her. So I wasn't being evil, or manipulative. She was just unlucky," finished Rias, cheeky smile hidden behind her interlocked hands. Kaneko suddenly straightened her back out. "The pervert and Asia are here, and by the scent, Naruto is also here," spoke Kaneko with a blank tone of voice, causing Rias to nod in acknowledgement. Soon the door opened wide and in walked Naruto, Issei and Asia, with the latter two walking side by side, and Naruto walking behind the two with his hands wrapped behind his head. Seeing everyone appear, Rias cleared her throat. "Okay. Seeing as how we are all here now, I am here to give you all a slight heads up about a competition between both my and Sona's peerage after school. This competition will allow the winners to go to the familiar forest. Rias seemed to stop as soon as she noticed Issei's hand shoot up slightly, nervousness easily noticeable upon his facial features. "Yes, Issei?" asked Rias, slightly annoyed at having been stopped, before she got over it. Issei scratched his cheek slightly as he looked towards Rias. Bucko. What exactly is the familiar forest?" asked Issei, his nervousness once again present. Rias blinked for a second before showing a smile. The familiar forest is where special creatures reside that is open to us devils. Basically, when a devil becomes used to his activities, the devil is then granted an opportunity to gain a familiar, which is basically a creature that bonds with you. A familiar is then able to give out flyers for you and use their abilities at any time. Say for instance, if you had a dragon familiar, she would be a strong fighter. Finished Rias, watching as Issei's face went through a few emotions. Issei seemed to understand, before clicking his fingers. "What do you mean about a familiar handing out flyers for us? Wouldn't people notice if like a dragon was handing them a piece of paper?" asked Issei. Rias sighed once more before giving Issei an explanation. Most familiars have a human form which they can switch into at any given moment. However, there are a few species that don't have a human form, and dragons. Finished Rias once more, gaining a nod from Issei. While this was going on, Naruto was carefully contemplating what he was hearing. There apparently was a forest full of creatures that could become bonded to you if both you and the creature wanted. It almost sounded like a sumjutsu, only with the caster being able to summon one creature. I know that you can have more than one, but Akeno didn't state that she had more than one in the conversation. Naruto suddenly jolted his head towards the clock as he heard a bell go. The final bell if the clock was right. Looking around, Naruto noticed that he was the only one left in the club room that Rias used for her peerage. Shaking his head, Naruto stood up before he narrowed his eyes. Sending a pulse of chakra out in all directions, Naruto relaxed himself slightly when he noticed that there was no signature for any devil, fallen, or angel. He even made sure that his fellow humans didn't appear on his radar. Seeing he was clear, Naruto summoned 10 clones, each holding the same narrowed look. Turning to a clone, Naruto gave his instructions. Find out everything about Rias and the whole devils, fallen and regular angels. Also, if there is anything saying something about Ophis, make sure you remember word for word, every bit of info. Stated Naruto as he felt the signatures of his fellow members waiting at the gym. Looking at his clones once more, Naruto gave a short nod before disappearing.